You've probably already heard about the potential for a government shutdown, and it's very possible that you're listening to this and we're already in the middle of one. So, I understand that politics and economic jargon can sometimes get confusing. So, if you are new to all of this, this episode is specifically for you. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Finance Therapist podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Pava, and here is where we speak about all things feelings and finance. So today we're going to demystify the concept of government shutdowns, especially when they happen during economic struggles like we have right now. And I also want to give you some practical advice, just some general practical advice on what you can do to prepare, or if we're already in the shutdown by the time you hear this, what you can be doing in the moment. So, what exactly is a government shutdown? And again, this is really for those who have not been immersed much in politics or in economics, mostly only in their personal finance, and that is fine. I just want to make sure that if that's where you are, that you are aware of a bit of the trickle effect that can end up affecting you. So I don't mean to talk down to anyone here. I just want to make sure that if you're not aware of what can happen, that I'm here to help you. So think of it this way. Imagine your local grocery store is the only one available, okay? Just pretend that the local grocery store that you have is the only one available, and you just found out that the two main managers can't figure out something. They can't agree on something. So the only way to solve the problem in their eyes is to have a government shutdown. They're going to hold the finances and they're not going to be ordering anything. They're not going to be hiring anyone. They're not going to do much of anything. And that is what it is like to have a government shutdown. So various government services and agencies will stop operating because lawmakers just can't agree. And it doesn't matter where you are politically. So if you are someone who is up on politics or economics, I understand that you may have a feeling one way or another about this. So I just want to make sure that those who don't understand, and I want them to have kind of a baseline of why they should care. And especially when there's already an economic strife as we have right now. So why should you care about this? Great question. Glad you asked. Well, when the government shuts down, it can have a ripple effect on all of our lives, and this impact can be much more pronounced during economic hardship like we have right now, like I said. So I'm going to give you 3 key points, and I'm going to go into them in a little bit more detail. So really quickly, federal employees. First and foremost, thousands of federal employees, from park rangers to IRS workers, may be furloughed or forced to work without any pay during a shutdown. Now, this is going to create, obviously, stress for them and their families and for you. Then we have public services like national parks, or maybe you wanted to get your passport. That's probably not going to happen. Routine safety inspections can come to a halt. It can disrupt all of your travel plans, impact safety standards, and so much more. So we're going to go into more detail with that as well. Also, we can't ignore the economic impact. A government shutdown can also affect us on a much broader economy. Small businesses that rely on government contracts can suffer. Economic growth generally can slow down. So these are important concepts, and I want to go into more detail with them before we get into some of the ways that we can maybe cope. I'm also going to be going into some areas of history that I hope that we don't repeat. That is going to be a little bit scarier, and that's later on. But let's first talk about federal employees. Now, I know for some people who have been primarily focused on or just now getting interested in their personal finance and really getting out of debt and learning how to have a better relationship with their finances, I get that talking about federal employees might seem like, who cares? That's them, this is me. But there is a ripple effect, and I want you to understand how this could affect you as well. Also, it's just compassionate to think about it. Most of the federal employees that are going to be affected are not going to be the people who are arguing and bickering back and forth. So imagine you are a federal employee, and maybe you are. You work for a government agency, and maybe your job is to make sure the local park is safe, or process tax returns, or handle essential government functions, whatever that might be. During a government shutdown, you might suddenly find yourself facing complete financial stress. Why? Because you might be on unpaid leave, or you might be deemed essential, and you have to go to work, but you're not going to get paid. So you're not going to get paid until the shutdown ends. So this can create, of course, significant challenges for you and your family because bills are going to pile up. Expenses don't stop just because income has. And federal employees, in many ways, like you and me, have mortgages, have rent, have to get groceries, have children to support. So that uncertainty and financial strain caused by a government shutdown can lead to real hardship and missed rent, mortgage payments, delayed medical care, even difficulty putting food on the table is a real issue that could happen for many, many people. So that can also lead to increased emotional stress, anxiety, as employees wonder when they will get their next check. And this also puts a burden on our communities as well. So this is very important to understand that this can affect everyone, even if it's initially directly affecting some. Now, earlier I spoke about public services, and I know that some people also don't see how that can ripple. So I want to explain that. Let's say you've been planning a vacation and you're going to go hop on an airplane. Maybe you even need a passport. Number one, the passport situation, like I told you before, may not happen for you. But let's just say you were going to go on an airplane and you were going to go to a national park that you've been dreaming about going with your family and having lasting memories, yada, yada. Well, you're excited about this, but suddenly you learn that due to a government shutdown, that national park is closed. So right there, your vacation is in jeopardy. But before you even get to that park, imagine the air traffic controller has been working without any money and they're exhausted and stressed out. Do you feel safe being on an airplane at that point? So all public services, are really affected by a shutdown, such as getting your passport, like I said, safety inspections. These things can directly affect your life. And even delays can cause you to miss important events or family gatherings. So delayed safety inspections could raise concerns about product safety or workplace conditions even. In essence, a government shutdown can disrupt your personal plans and routines, affecting everything from your family vacation to the safety standards you rely on every day of your life for yourself and your loved ones. So, what about the economic impact? And listen, I get you might not own a small business that directly contracts with the government, but you probably know someone who does. Small businesses often rely on government contracts to survive and thrive. During a government shutdown, these contracts can be delayed or even canceled, impacting the livelihood of a local business owner in your community and all of their employees. In the broader scope of the economic impact of a government shutdown, that can also touch your life. Economic growth can slow down due to reduced government spending. This also will often affect job growth and overall health of the job market. So if you or someone you know is looking for employment or job security, a government shutdown can make that situation much more challenging. Additionally, the financial markets can become much more crazy during a shutdown, affecting your investments and retirement savings. Uncertainty in the markets can lead to fluctuations in stock prices, potentially impacting your financial well-being. In summary, government shutdowns may seem like a distant political event, but they have tangible and direct effects on our lives, and they can disrupt personal plans, create financial stress, and even influence economic conditions. I made a list of the 9 most common consequences that have happened in the past of the past shutdowns, and these are notable outcomes from past government shutdowns that I just want you to be aware of. And we're going to talk in a little bit about preparing, okay? So one of the most immediate and visible consequences of a government shutdown is obviously the furloughing of federal employees. During a shutdown, many government workers are placed on unpaid leave. And again, this is financial hardship for them, for their families, and often for you. Then we have the impact of government services, which we again talked about already. This is where you have a wide range of federal services that are just suddenly not working anymore. They're closed, or they're delayed, or there's routine safety issues that are just not being even addressed. So not only can this inconvenience you, but in some cases, it's downright dangerous. Then we have economic impact. So we obviously know that this is going to hit us economically. Small businesses, not only small businesses, actually, small businesses, large businesses in your community, credit card rating agencies have even downgraded the U.S. government's credit rating in the past, citing political gridlock and fiscal instability resulting from shutdowns. So there's just a lot going on financially under the hood that we need to be aware of. Also, expect a backlog of services. So when the government reopens after a shutdown, there have been agencies that face a backlog of work. For example, the IRS may have to process tax returns with delays, leading to delayed tax refunds for individuals and businesses. So it's just important to understand that even when the government reopens, there's still going to be potential issues. And also, it's not just that everything that I just said is just magically going to appear again. We still have the safety issues that weren't tended to. We still have the impact on the families that were affected directly and indirectly. So when the government closes, when it shuts down and reopens, it's not a magic wand that everything's all better. And even if one political side feels like they won, no one really wins here. So anyway, so we then have political fallout, speaking of them. So that is when the government shutdown has political repercussions, basically. So they result in disagreements between political parties. The parties are seen as responsible for the shutdown, and that party may actually get a backlash. So what you often see right before a shutdown is both parties really trying to tell the public why their side is right, and they try to point the finger at the other side. That's usually a big clue that a shutdown's going to happen. And I was actually watching someone today on Instagram, and she was talking about, how there's going to be a shutdown and how, their side really didn't want one, but it's the other people's fault. And just when I saw that, I was like, okay, it's probably happening because they're prepping us, basically. They're prepping us to not have that backlash at them. So political fallout is a big deal. Public opinion about the government and elected officials can decline greatly during and after a shutdown. So it's interesting that this will be happening right now before elections. This is important to really think about here. So there's also the cost of shutdown. It's a paradox. The government shuts down and they're trying to focus on a budget, but what they're really doing is costing everyone more, and they're costing themselves more. So this is because administration is having a cost of closing, and reopening government agencies is also costly, as well as the economic consequence of reducing government spending. It just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but it happens. So it also usually only offers, in the past, historically, temporary solutions. In some cases, government shutdowns have resulted in short-term funding solutions rather than resolving the underlying budget issues. This has led to a cycle of reoccurring shutdowns and temporary funding patches. Now, this one is really near to my heart. Social services. Social programs that depend on federal funding, such as Head Start, nutrition assistance programs, these can all be affected by shutdowns. Vulnerable populations may experience disruptions in critical services. This, to me, is probably the one that bothers me the most, because shutdowns can bother people in mid to high income households, but they crush people in lower income households, especially children. So this one is just really near to my heart, and I hope it is near to yours too. Now, this is the last one before we get into the coping for this, is public perception and confidence. This one I think is the least important and the most important in different ways, because it's the least important because it's not affecting us in our survival mode in the moment, but long term, it really does break us down. So government shutdowns can obviously erode public trust and confidence in the government's ability to even govern effectively. This uncertainty and instability that they create can negatively affect businesses and consumer confidence. So it's important to note that these outcomes can vary from one instance to another, and the impact often depends on the length of the shutdown, which services they decide to shut down, because they don't always shut down everybody, and the overall economic and political context at the time. So, as such, government shutdowns are generally seen as undesirable events and have the potential to harm both government operations and the broader society, meaning us. So let's talk about how we can cope. The first area that I want to speak about is an emergency fund. Having an emergency fund is like having a financial safety net. It's a stash of money set aside for unexpected events, like medical emergencies, car repairs, or, even a government shutdown. Now, during economic struggle, this fund becomes even more crucial, especially if you're in a government shutdown and you have a medical emergency or a car repair that you need. So I want you to think of it as a buffer. And I know that often myself and others will recommend saving at least 3 to 6 months worth of your living expenses in an emergency fund or more. And I know that sounds like a lot, and I'm not asking you to do that right now, because especially if you're listening and you're paycheck to paycheck, or even struggling more than that, there's no way you're going to be able to save 3 to 6 months in 2 weeks or whatever. But what I do want you to do is try to save a little bit more. Do not do any extraneous spending right now if possible. Remember, this is temporary. So I'm not asking you to stay in this tight hold forever just for the next couple of weeks until we know what's happening. Because even if you have $50 or $25, you can take that $25 and go to the dollar store and buy some food, okay? I want you to start thinking of that kind of mentality, and maybe you already do that. So if you're already someone who's struggling, I need you to think in those terms. If you're someone who's more mid-income, try to save a little bit more, because you're still going to be hit, because many people who are mid-income are still living paycheck to paycheck. You are giving the illusion of living in a mid-income space with that, 2 cars and the picket fence and everything else. But I know, and you know, that you're probably living paycheck to paycheck, and you're probably 1 to 3 paychecks between getting, evicted or having a mortgage issue. So I want you to, if you're struggling financially, to make sure you have an emergency fund. If you're not struggling financially, you probably already have an emergency fund. Just make sure some of it is fluid. So make sure that you have something near you to handle, because if you haven't started building your emergency fund, now is the time to begin. But if you already have it, now is the time to make sure it's fluid, because government shutdowns can become a roller coaster in even trying to get your money out. So the second thing is stay informed during a government shutdown. It's your best defense. But what exactly should you look out for? Well, the first step is to follow reliable news sources to get updates on the shutdown's progress. Understanding which services are affected can help you plan your daily life. For example, I'm going back to national parks again. If national parks are closed, you might want to alter your vacation plans. If passport processing is delayed, you might need to put off that trip to Europe. So, mostly I want you to focus really though on safety. So safety inspections and knowing that it's wise to be extra cautious right now in your daily activities is key. So furthermore, I want you to just stay informed, anticipate any potential delay or hiccup in government assistance programs if that pertains to you. For instance, if you rely on government subsidies for housing or food, it's essential to know that these disruptions could happen and make alternative plans. So just make it a habit to check whatever news source that you enjoy, check them and check them often, and also go right to the official government websites regularly during a shutdown to stay updated on developments that could impact your life and mine. Lastly, I want you to reach out to your representatives. Your elected officials are there to represent your interests, and they can be a valuable resource during a government shutdown. Now, earlier I spoke about a woman who did an Instagram Live, and she was telling people if you are in a certain color state, and she mentioned a certain color, you need to reach out to your representative and tell them you don't want this anymore. But she didn't say everyone should reach out to their representative. It was very biased. Now, I'm telling you, it doesn't matter what color state you're in, you should be reaching out to your representative. You need to put the pressure on the government to figure out how to resolve this. So 1, contact them. Don't hesitate to call or email your local representatives and senators. Share your concerns about the shutdown and how it's affecting you and your community. Their offices are there to assist you, and they may be able to provide guidance or connect you with resources. That's very important. I want you to also think of yourself as an activist. I want you to encourage your representatives to find common ground and work towards ending the shutdown. Express your desire to have them prioritize the well-being of the people that they serve over political differences. Also, I want you to stay engaged. Keep an eye on your representatives' actions and statements regarding the shutdown. Understand their positions so that you can make an informed decision during elections and hold them accountable. And also, really support their work. If your representative is actively working to end the shutdown and protect your interests, show support. Positive reinforcement can encourage them to continue to advocate on your behalf. I just want you to remember that your voice matters and that you matter, and that if we have a government shutdown, we all may be struggling in different ways and at different levels, but we will all be struggling. And it's my intention that while a government shutdown can be a challenge, especially during economic struggle like we have now, I feel that with some preparation and community spirit, we definitely can weather the storm together. And I feel like it's very important to uncover some resources that might be available for us. And I just want to thank you for spending this time together today. I know this was a longer podcast than I normally do. I just hope this episode has shed some light on a topic that affects us all that you may not be as aware of because you're just getting involved in personal finance or understanding your relationship with money. And I realize that most of my audience is in that space. So no matter what your political leaning is or your economic background, I respect you and care about you. And I want you to thrive, not just survive. So as always, thank you for listening to the Finance Therapist podcast. I'm Michelle Pava, and I would love for you to follow and stay connected with me. Go to thefinancepherapist.com unveiledpodcast.com, and I have free resources there. And thank you, and hopefully we will get through this unscathed.